Welcome to today's episode of Magnus Mindset Podcast, where it's our mission to help you grow in the skills, knowledge, and relationships to help you live your best. I'm your host, Tim Balow, and if you haven't done so already, be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another podcast episode. Hey, in today's episode, we're going to continue our discussion in habits. We have been talking about the idea that when it comes to our habits, we need to identify who we want to be before we can really determine what we need to do. In the last episode, we talked about how you can stop some of your bad habits by, number one, identifying the triggers that put you in a place where you make those negative decisions. Again, one small negative decision isn't going to wreck your life, typically, but those compound over time and will eventually have negative consequences that we typically kind of, as the phrase is, kick the can down the field, down the street, and see what those will look like another day. Today I want to talk about then how do we flip that instead of looking at the negative. How do we start doing some of those positive habits? How do we start getting those good ideas into those good actions into our life so that we are moving actually toward our goals rather than moving away from our goals? If you're like me, then I'm going to guess you probably find yourself that you woke up today and your work day, your plans, if it's a work day week, it's probably pretty similar to what you've done before. In fact, over 40% of the actions that we do daily, they're really not the result of decision making. They're just habits. So if we're going to change our life and where we're going, who we're becoming, and we've got to change our habits. We know who we want to be. Now we need to start identifying those positive actions. You know, you look at your morning, you pop up and maybe you hop out of bed, and before you even started your day, you've already scrolled through Instagram, you had some food, you got a shower in, you drove the same way to work, you did the similar tasks, you do the same thing with the same people at work, you drive home. It's pretty routine, right? You kind of have this repeating day. Well, instead, we want to move that forward and start identifying the things in our day that are actually maybe distracting from us moving forward on our goals, and what actions could we be putting into our day? And you say, well, I don't have enough time for that. Well, if you don't make that time, then it's really never going to happen. You need to identify those positive actions and start repeating those regularly throughout the course of your day, because successful people do consistently what other people do occasionally. So if I want to be a good husband, a good dad, a good leader, then I need to identify what are the small positive things that I can be successful at, that I can put into practice little over time, a little over time, a little over time. And then I'm going to grow in those areas. I'm going to develop my skills in there. I'm going to try to listen to other podcasts or read articles, read books that help me to be a better leader, a better dad, a better husband. I'm going to be moving in those right directions because I want it to be noticeable in my life in time. Someone might not notice that right away, but let's say you add up the cumulative effect of these positive habits over a year, then hopefully you at least would begin to notice. Well, other people might not even notice either. I can give you a perfect example of this. I went into my dental hygienist and, she was kind of working with my teeth. And at the time, things were not so great, I'll say, in my mouth. And she, this is years ago, had recommended, hey, getting one of those electric toothbrushes and consider getting a water pick and make sure that you're flossing. And, I put all those positive habits into effect. I took all those words that she said into effect. I went and grabbed a recommended electric toothbrush. We got the water pick, was flossing, doing that kind of stuff. And my next office visit was remarkable. My dental hygienist was like, boy, there's really barely anything here to do because you've been keeping up on your teeth. So again, that isn't something that anybody else would have noticed other than me and my dental hygienist. But it was a good habit that I put into place. And I'm still doing that years and years and years later. This is kind of my personal dental hygiene that I do. So based on who you want to become, what's one habit that you feel like you need to start? So like, for instance, it doesn't have to really be big. It's better actually if it's small. So if you wanted to start changing your morning routine, so instead of hitting snooze, you start getting up just 15 minutes earlier. If you want to become someone who you would be more compassionate, that's the kind of person you want to be, then consider writing one note of appreciation a day. If you're a person who you're trying to be more organized this year, then consider making your bed first thing when you get up. If you're a person that wants to be focused, then consider starting your day with a list of 3 priorities to do that day. If you're trying to be a healthier person, consider eliminating like soft drinks or sugary snacks from your daily diet. Let's talk about like how do you really go about creating these new habits. So once you've kind of identified what you think you need to do, what is the action that you need to perform, then there's this what's called a habit loop. And much like we talked about with the negative habits is that there is a trigger that leads to an action that then leads to what you would perceive as a reward. There's, on the opposite side, a new habit loop. So if you're trying to create a positive habit, you are going to have a cue. Rather than a trigger, there's a cue that, like a cue card. It tells you that this is what I need to do next. And that's where you get into a new habit because of the new response. It's causing you to actually have a response to that cue. Think in terms of like the Pavlovian response, you ring the bell, the dog salivates. So when this happens, then this is my cue that I should do that, which then will bring you that reward because then at that point you are doing what it is that you set out to do. So let's talk about this cue, routine, and reward. Number one, you want to make that really, really obvious. So as you're doing different things, you want to make that cue really, really simple for you. So changing, where it is, how it is, the kinds of systems that we talked about in the last one that helps you to be ready to move, one, when that cue happens and what your response and the new routine that you're going to do. So for instance, if you want to get into a habit of reading before bedtime, don't leave that book on the bookshelf. Put it on your nightstand. Put it someplace where you're going to see it. I know for myself, I wanted to make sure I was more regularly taking my vitamins and my supplements. Well, if I bury them in the drawer, it's not likely I'm ever going to get those. So I actually went out and bought some of those little, holders that you get for like prescriptions and put all my vitamins, rather than them being in their separate bottles, I put them together for the day. And that way, in the morning, after I've eaten, I know that I can walk into my bathroom, grab that box, pop out my vitamins, and I'm ready to go. So you want to make it really, really obvious. The other thing is you want to make it really, really easy so that, when that cue happens, it's easy to move into your next step in your next action. Here's what I mean by that, is that if you're not reaching your goals, it's a system problem, and you're going to do this setup where you're going to say the system is, when this happens, then I will do this. So goals are really good for setting a direction, but you really need those systems to help you make the progress. So here's what I'm talking about. You're going to name the cue and you're going to name the action that you want to have with that. So for instance, I will do this after I what? So what is the cue? Then what is the action? Give you a couple quick examples of in our own lives. I know that after dinner, I want to take a 30-minute walk. So after we've had our dinner for the evening, if the weather is good, I'm going to take a walk outside. If the weather is not so great, then I'm going to take a walk on the treadmill. If after I make the coffee, I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes thinking through my day, making prioritizations, or maybe I'm going to do some meditation, some pondering, some declarations for the morning, whatever that might look like. So the point of all this, as I'm putting this together, the I will do this after I do this is a great way for you to make it really easy. Also make it obvious, because here's the point, is guys, never underestimate. It's the power of that 1 degree of change. While it may not feel like a lot to begin with, it does have significant impact over time. So keep it up. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure that you share it with a friend. Again, remember to click subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the episodes of this podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.